Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to our entitled people, where people truly think they can do what they want, when they want, because they're special. And in today's episode, people who work in security share the most outrageous Karen encounters they've ever had. We've got sneaky Karens, people getting their cars towed, trashing hotels. It's a wild one, so yeah, sit back, relax, and enjoy the wild stories today. Let's dive in. So a few decades ago, in the early 90s, I was the director of security at a fancy 5-star hotel. I participated in a monthly meeting with other hotel security heads, hosted by the local police. At one of these meetings, the topic of the banquet imposter came up. Apparently, there was an older woman who had been discovered in attendance at banquet functions that she wasn't specifically invited to. The woman would dress nicely, and she would attend weddings, fundraisers, and social events. She would mingle with all the guests, have a few cocktails, blend in, and then just leave. She was well known to local police, as her first trick was showing up at businesses in downtown office towers, saying she was the new employee and try to go to work. She would then sneak around the office and steal office supplies and food from break rooms. She was apparently articulate, convincing, and at times charming. Almost. She was also certified crazy. In all cases, her undoing would be when she started talking. The woman had very strange views on everything, and she would quickly show her crazy side to anyone who cared to listen to her for 5 minutes. She had been trespassed from most downtown office towers, and she had recently started frequenting hotel banquet functions. Actual guests would try to figure out who she was at first. Was she Aunt Mildred from Frank's side of the family? Perhaps Cousin Becky's piano tutor, or Uncle Freddie's third wife? Sometimes she would last the whole night. Other times, she would be exposed within minutes of arrival. She had been kicked out of functions at several other hotels, and she had probably attended events at our hotel without being exposed. But it was only a matter of time. We shared a picture of her at the monthly meeting, and we posted copies in the banquet office and service areas. We also knew her full name. So that said, the call came several weeks later. A banquet server recognized the lady as a guest at one of her tables. Now, she probably would have stayed under the radar, but during the salad course, she literally threw a full-on screaming tantrum. She made a big deal about not having pine nuts as she was allergic. The server complied, but then crazy lady finds one, and she allegedly throws a screaming fit. She couldn't produce the actual nut, and we all know who the actual nut is, and she wanted to speak to a manager. The server went to the kitchen to find the banquet manager, and as she was relaying the story, she glanced at the picture on the wall behind him and made the ID. The banquet manager then called my dispatcher and waited for me at the ballroom service doors. Myself and a junior officer arrived in short order, and we confirmed her identity from across the room. She had a distinctive hair color and style. I asked the banquet manager to go speak to her, and the officer went to back him up. I suggested he ask her to come to his office to discuss compensation for the pine nut incident. I took the back way to his office and let myself in. I was already inside when they arrived. The banquet office was barely big enough for a desk, let alone 4 people. Inside the office, I closed the door, and she starts talking about how much money she should get. And that's when I shut her down. I told her I knew who she was, what her gig was, and she could spare me all of her BS. Junior officer then told her that we're going to escort her off the property, that she wasn't welcome back, and if she did return, she would face charges. She then walks right up to me. I'm 6'5", 240 pounds, so I tower over her. And she yelled in my face, "Who do you think you are? Do you have any idea who the F I am?" She punctuated each word by poking her little finger hard into my chest. I bat her hand away, and she came back with an open-handed slap right across my face that took me by surprise. The slap was so hard, it ends up snapping my head back. My officer was on her in a flash, and despite her size, she did put up a good fight. The woman literally went down swinging at the junior officer. We both fought with her for a good minute or so until we got the other wrist. We finally sat her down in a chair and we were all breathing hard. The junior officer then explained to her that he was making a citizen's arrest for assaulting me and him. I then called dispatch to have the police summoned. Crazy Lady, meanwhile, turns into Linda Blair with a loud scream of the most disturbing profanity you've ever heard. She'd make a longshoreman blush. It took 15 minutes for the police to arrive. 2 cops. One was a female officer, and the other was the biggest cop I'd ever seen, before and since. Wookiee-sized. He was standing in the doorway and ducking his head to fit under the doorframe. As soon as Crazy Lady sees the Wookiee cop, she starts crying that she was innocent, that we hurt her, and she was having an allergic reaction. She said her wrist hurt from being handcuffed, and seriously, she was playing it up pretty good. The female cop came into the office and asked us to remove our handcuffs as they would take it from there. The lady cop was consoling the Crazy Lady and helped her out of the chair, turning her back to me so I could uncuff her. I just shook my head and I said I don't think that's a good idea. I suggest the lady cop put her bracelets on before I took ours off. The Crazy Lady then screams, "It hurts." And that's when Lady Cop says to me, "I'm not gonna ask you again." I say, "Okay, remember, this was your idea." So I put the key in and turned it, and the cuff ratcheted open. Now, I don't know what she planned to do, but it happened so quick. The Crazy Lady snatches her still cuffed hand away, and I guess she was trying to swing at something. All I remember is that caused the loose handcuff to smack the lady cop right across the face. Then, she ducks towards the door and tried to escape. She of course ran directly into Wookiee Cop. Wookiee Cop pushes her back into the office and follows her in. The banquet office became a human maelstrom as there were 6 of us now. The desk was overturned, clipboards wiped off the walls, chairs smashed, filing cabinets fell over. We all fought her for at least 5 minutes while Wookiee Cop was bellowing, "Stop resisting." Looking back, we were lucky that this was in the age before cops carried pepper spray or tasers, or we would have all gotten hit. It came to a crucible when Crazy Lady gets her hands on the butt of Wookiee Cop's Glock. It was safely holstered, but that's when Wookiee Cop stopped being a gentleman, and he smacks her right in the head with his catcher's mitt-sized hand. It made an amazing smack sound, and all the fight drains out of her. She just went limp. Lady Cop gets her cuffed, and they take her out of the destroyed office. Lady Cop then said to me, "I see what you mean." And I'm thinking, you think? They took our various statements, and we read her the Petty Trespass Act, and she caught several charges on top of my assault charge. One of the extra charges was her trying to kick out the back window of the cop car. Also, during the intake search at the jail, they found a gram of coke in her purse. We never saw her again, and I found out 18 months later that she was tried and convicted of enough of the charges to get her 48 months in prison. The most ironic part of this experience is I kind of respected her for doing this. She was a lesser catch me if you can character. If only she kept her mouth shut though. Seriously, who else is amazed at the audacity of some people? Like, hate on Karens all you want, but the thing that never ceases to amaze me, guys, is the self-confidence that comes with the self-entitlement. Like, being able to pull off something like this many times before finally getting caught, kudos to her. My only question is why? Like, she's gotta get some sort of a rush from doing something like this, right? So I've worked security for a long time now, and in my first year of working security, I was at a big shopping center for a well-known chain/company. I do have a lot of stories from my many years of working security jobs, but this one's the most memorable. So it's around 10 p.m. and most of the stores locked up, apart from a few late night stores like cinemas and major stores like Walmart, which are only accessible from select entrances. We get a call for a person requiring medical assistance at Walmart, and we proceed there. After performing the required first aid and calling an ambulance, I'm put on ambulance detail, which is waiting in the designated parking bay for them to arrive and escort them in. So I'm standing out there, waiting and diverting people from parking there as it's close to the ATMs. Everybody's moving with minimal fuss until the one shows up. And you know the one. Rules don't apply to them because reasons, aka the Karen of this post. So I say to Karen, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna have to ask you to move. We're waiting on an ambulance to arrive for someone inside. Karen says, I'll only be 5 minutes, I'm just going to the ATM. Again, I say to her, I'm sorry, but you need to move. All you have to do is back up 10 meters and you're in the non-emergency spot. She then gets out of the car and starts walking to the ATM. She says out loud to me, I'm just going to the ATM. It's all good. At this point, I just sigh. I step aside knowing what's gonna happen. I think to myself, fine, whatever, but don't say I didn't warn you. The ambulance comes around the corner not too shortly after, and I wave to them so they know I'm there. They see the car parked in the emergency bay, and they pull in behind it, so it's forming a T, blocking Karen in. The driver's side of the ambulance is about an inch away from the back of Karen's vehicle, so there's nowhere to go. By this time, Karen's trying to rush through her transaction, and she comes barging up to the ambulance saying, Hey, you need to move, you're blocking me in. The paramedic tells her, I'm sorry, but there is an emergency and we're in a hurry. He then gets out and proceeds to start getting his kit from the ambulance. And Karen says, I'm in a hurry, you need to move. That's when I pipe up and say, I'm so sorry, but you were told before that an ambulance was coming and you refused to move. Karen, now getting angry, says, F off, you wannabe cop, you didn't say crap to me. She then says to the paramedic, are you going to move your effing ambulance or not? The paramedic looks at Karen and calmly says, not. He then collects his last bag and he begins to head inside with myself and the other paramedic. By this time, Karen's livid. She's cursing while heading back to her car. I go inside with the paramedics and I direct them to the person inside before heading back outside to make sure Karen doesn't do something completely stupid. At this point, I find her trying to Austin Powers her way out of the parking lot. And I should have mentioned earlier that the front of her car was parked up against a 3-foot wall, and she was having no luck at all. I'm watching Karen from a distance when the paramedics come out with the patient on the stretcher and proceed to load him into the back of the ambulance. Karen screams at them and says, Finally, took you long enough, now you can move and I can get out of here. Well, unfortunately for Karen, and unbeknownst to me, while they were inside, one of them had called the police and told them what's going on. The police hadn't arrived yet, but they had been told they were 5 minutes out. So once they've loaded up the patient, they begin doing some more checks, making sure the patient's comfortable, none of the electrodes for the machineries come off, all that stuff. While this is happening, of course, Karen's getting angrier and angrier, and I'm just waiting for her to snap and do something stupid. When lo and behold, 2 police cars come into view. They pull in nearby. 4 officers get out and come over to us, and the paramedic points to Karen and says, That's the person, before going back to his work. That's when the police officer says, You, pointing to Karen, here, now. Karen slowly walks over with her head lowered, and she says, Yes, officer. The officer lays into her and says, First, why are you parked in an emergency bay? And secondly, why are you yelling at the paramedics whose spot you're parked in? Cue the crocodile tears. Karen says to the officer, Officer, I didn't know it was emergency only. I was going to the ATM because I needed to get some money. I got angry when they blocked me in because I have somewhere important to be, and they laughed at me. The officer looks from Karen to me and he asks, Is this true? I respond, "No, sir." I told her twice what the bay was for and that the ambulance was expected. She didn't care. Karen loudly and in anger, trying to sell her own version, says, "Well, that's a load of crap. You didn't say anything. You stood right over there, and you only came over when you saw an ambulance was coming while I was at the ATM." The officer looks from Karen to me to Karen back to me and then says, "So who am I going to believe?" At this point, I'm in a bit of a pickle as I have no proof of what I said. And that's when a voice pipes up from a random person who had been there the entire time. The random person says, "Actually, officer, the guard did tell the woman to move twice. I've been here the entire time waiting for a jump start, so I know for a fact it happened." Karen then looks at the random citizen who's just destroyed her little story, and she says, "Nobody effing asked you, you effing moron. Are we talking to you? So mind your own damn business." The officer just looks at Karen and he says, "Get in your car now, I'll deal with you in a minute." So Karen heads back to the car, hops inside, and slams the door shut. The police talk with the paramedics, the patient, and me for a little bit, while the paramedics are doing the last of their checks before stating they're good to go. One of the paramedics gets in the driver's seat, and one of the police officers gets in his car and goes to pull up behind the ambulance. Karen saw the ambulance getting ready to leave, so she starts her car as well. As the ambulance pulls away, Karen's jaw hits the floor when it's replaced by a police car. At this point, it's now just Karen getting reamed by the cop for everything she's done. Meanwhile, I'm just taking notes for the report I have to write up. Karen, of course, gets a ticket, and she's let go. I hope you enjoyed my story. Again, the self-entitlement of some people is off the charts, right? Let's park in a spot designated for emergency-only personnel and then yell at them for blocking me in and wasting my time. Like, do some people seriously never ever think, "Whoops, my bad"? That said, I do love posts like this where Karens get exactly what they deserve, and in this case, hopefully a big, fat ticket. Justice served. So I used to work as security at a hotel for 3 years, and the absolute worst entitled people were hockey parents. Our hotel was attached to a large indoor water park and centrally located, so we were a prime choice for youth sports tournaments. Most sports teams were rowdy, but hockey parents and their kids took it to a whole new level. A group of hockey teams stayed with us annually, and the amount of complaints and damage they caused forced us to implement a waiver. Hockey parents had to sign this agreement at check-in, saying they wouldn't bring minors in the bar, they wouldn't leave minors unattended after 10 p.m., and they needed to forfeit their hockey sticks to the front desk or to be kept in their vehicles. The agreement was approved by their league, and any violation of the rules would be reported and the child would be barred from competing. The rules were strict, and we had backing from the league after we told them about the $10,000 plus damage caused by a hockey parent from their previous year, which brings us to the waiver form. A lot of these entitled parents were furious about the waiver form, most of them screaming things like, "How am I supposed to watch my kids if you won't let them come into the bar? And you have adults working in the lobby at all times, right? Then why do I need to accompany them?" They figured that we were their babysitters since they were paying for the rooms. The biggest issue was forfeiting the hockey sticks. The entitled parents were cussing out the staff, saying the sticks were too expensive and we might steal or break them. While trying to calm them down, I get a radio call from the food and beverage manager, saying there were hockey parents sneaking in through the patio entrance with their hockey sticks and they were heading to the elevators. I realized the bastards at the desk were causing a diversion, so I quickly walked to the elevator and I intercepted the sneaking entitled parents. There were a lot of expletives and threats, but I was courteous and firm that they weren't going upstairs with the sticks, and they eventually stormed back to their cars. After the manager locked the patio, the rest of the check-ins were still angry, but less dramatic. The next day, I come in to find my head of security, who we'll call Dawn, still there from the overnight shift. Usually, he's gone by the time the morning shift rolls in, but he stuck around to tell me what happened overnight, and that's when he pulled up the security tapes. The parents were drinking heavily in the bar, ignoring their kids as expected. Around midnight, some of them tried to sneak their hockey sticks in again. They already didn't like Don because he made some of the parents collect their unsupervised kids from the lobby earlier. So when he was standing in the elevator bay to block them, things got ugly. I watched the security footage of the first two parents giving him attitude, but after a few minutes of bitching, they left. That's when a group of 8 or so dads shows up with more hockey stick bags. One tried to physically push past Don to the elevators, so Don steps in front of him. The dads then surrounded Don and then grabbed their phones out to film as they cussed him out and challenged him to a fight. This is when I smiled because a part of me wanted to see Don kick some parent's ass, but he quietly reiterated that they were not getting upstairs with the sticks, and then asked which one of them would like to ruin their child's hockey tournament by throwing the first punch. This made them back off, and eventually they took the hockey sticks back to their cars. Don gave me the rundown on the rest of the less exciting things before he headed out, including a report that a dog was heard growling on the same floor as the hockey parents. Housekeeping later confirmed it belonged to the same dad that tried to push past Don. Fast forward a couple of hours, and I get a call on the radio while I'm on break that the supervisor needs some backup. At the time, we didn't have a manager for the front desk, so tough cases were handled by the supervisor. When I rounded the corner, who do I see but the star of last night's security footage, the owner of the growling dog. The guy screaming at the supervisor saying, "Again, I would like to report my dissatisfaction with my stay. And I would like a complete refund because your security guard attacked me last night." The supervisor says, "Sir, please calm down. If you can't keep it down, we'll have to have security escort you out," gesturing to me. I'm deeply sorry to hear that. I see the guy give a smile to the group of other dads lingering behind him in the lobby. I then listen to the guy spill the whole sob story, how he and his friends were walking back from the bar, minding their own business, while the night security guard yelled at their wives for being too loud. And he was also commenting on how the wives should be getting naked. When he tried to stand up for his wife, the security guard shoved him and told him to mind his own business or he would get evicted. The guy also threw in that Don swore at his son when he was caught running in the lobby. He then ends with, "I don't know what the guy told you, but he was completely out of line to treat me or my family that way, and I want to be compensated. We all want full refunds for our stay." The supervisor tells him, "Given what you've told me, compensation would be completely reasonable, and I'm sorry that you felt the head of security was treating you unfairly. But I'm afraid I was already informed about the incident this morning, and his report is very different." That's when the guy loses it and he says, "Are you calling me a liar?" The supervisor says, "I reviewed the security footage from the elevator bay, and so has he," gesturing to me. And that's when the dad's face flushes. Supervisor then says, "So I'm afraid I can't justify compensation when you were attempting to bring in hockey sticks and threatening our staff." Supervisor then goes on and says, "And before you leave, I want to remind you about the policy on pets in the hotel." I watched as the dad leans in inches from the supervisor's face and says, "Do you really want to go there with me?" Supervisor says, "I'm afraid I do. Due to allergies and potential risks that untrained dogs pose to other guests, only registered service animals are allowed in the hotel." The guy screams and says, "He's trained. He's an emotional support animal for my son, and he's legally allowed to be anywhere." He then gets told, "I'm afraid that's not the same as a trained service dog. As long as the dog's well-mannered, I have no problem with it since you're from out of state. But I have already received reports that the dogs growled at staff. It can't be left alone in the room, it can't go in the water park, and there will be an associated cleaning fee for pet dander/fur." That's when the guy screams, "F you and F this hotel." The guy then starts swiping papers off the desks, and that's when I come in. I told him that he had to calm down or he'd be taken off the premises and banned from ever coming back. Thankfully, my job was easy, as the guy was smart enough to apologize as his son still had to play in the tournament. I just smiled, wished him a good day, and walked back to my desk. Housekeeping did send me pictures of the dog, and it was locked in its crate all alone. The guy wasn't banned and wasn't compensated, but he was charged an extra $250 plus tax for a cleaning fee. Entitled parents are the worst, aren't they? And seriously guys, I believe it when Opie says the hockey ones are the worst. Like, I went to a school that had a lot of rich, spoiled hockey kids, and their parents are everything you'd imagine a middle-aged, I have too much money, my kid can do no wrong parent to act like. So I can only imagine what it was like dealing with a whole horde of them coming into a hotel. And you can tell they're just nightmare people when they argue the fact, well, you gotta let my kids into the bar. Like, how else am I gonna supervise them? Like, maybe don't get wasted at the bar every night, Karen. Like, who else is surprised they didn't get kicked out sooner? So here's some background. Years ago, in the early 2000s, my best friend and I owned a bar together. I usually worked as head of security to be safer for my guys, since I had more experience. Two guys, who we'll call Fat Tony and Low Cal, a thinner Tony, worked the door. One night, Low Cal comes up to me and he says, "Can you take my spot for a second? I gotta hit the can." So I do. I'm just checking IDs and getting people to pay for cover, rinse and repeat. I get through about 5 people, and that's when some random guy steps up with the whole stereotypical I'm a popular DJ clothing. The guy's wearing a white leisure suit kind of thing, like a windbreaker, with black striping on the seams. I say to him, ID, and $5 to the person behind me. The guy responds with, "Nah, it's okay, I know the owner." I just look at him blankly, and I say, "Okay." I repeat, ID, and $5 to the person behind me. The guy, looking self-important and maybe irritated, then says, "You don't understand. I know the effing owner." I reply, "Sure man, ID and $5 too." He then interrupts me and he says, "Man, you don't get it, do you, idiot? I'm friends with the owner, West. We're tight, we're like family." And yes, that's how he said it, so we'll just call him D-Bag now. I just continue looking at him and he says, "You get it now?" He says that with a smug look on his face, and by this time, it got quieter, even Fat Tony's looking over. Holding someone else's ID, he stops speaking, mouth open. That's when I say, "Oh, you mean Wes, as in my brother, as in the person whose family that I would take care of if anything happened to him." D-Bag eloquently responds, That's when I turn to Fat Tony, and I say, "Do you know this dude?" Dead serious, Fat Tony says, "I have no effing clue who this idiot is." The crowd goes completely silent. I then say to the guy, "Listen here, a-hole. You go to the end of the line and you find your ID, and when you get up here, $10 to the person behind me. Call it stupid tax. If you're going to name drop thinking it's gonna do something for you, you'd better know who you're talking to." Fat Tony's grinning now as the guy starts walking to the back, completely deflated. The crowd starts taunting him. Fat Tony laughs and says, "What a dumbass." The guy didn't actually bother to come in that night. We got a good laugh out of it, and we do tease Wes about it here and there to this day. Listen, we've all heard enough of these stories to learn that if you don't know the owner, keep their name out of your mouth. But yeah, that's r/entitled people for you, where people say what they want, when they want, to get what they want. Guys, if you enjoyed today's stories, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy, crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/malicious compliance episode. I know it's been a while, guys, where psycho bosses get exactly what they deserve. Guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.